My topic is experimental criminology, failure and victories. The experimental criminology is a part of criminology which deals with the scientific knowledge about crimes and thus providing aid to the justice delivery system. It is a part of a larger and increasingly expanding scientific research evidence based movement in social policy and is majorly used in developing and testing ideas for reducing crimes. When properly executed, it provides the ideal test of theories about the cause, effects, and prevention of crime in society. The word criminology is originally formed by joining two ancient Greek words, krino meaning accusations and logos meaning reason or study. What is experimental criminology? The experimental criminology is a field within criminology that uses scientific experiments to understand crimes, its cause, effects, relations, preventions, and punishment. It involves the controlled study of cause and effects with two subcategories, quasi experimental and experimental. Research is experimental when the subjects are randomly selected, whereas research is quasi experimental when the subjects are specifically picked up to study the cause and effects of a certain crime. In experimental criminology, samples are typically assigned between two groups and then observation is made to establish outcome measures, which could be some preventive measures against the crime. And development of experimental criminology. The start of experimental criminology to the Cambridge Somerville Youth Study is marshaled in the 1930s when 506 boys aged 5 to 13 were paired and randomly assigned to receive a multi-year program of support. The 30-year follow-up of this experiment by John M.C. Code found that the expensive program had no effect on the difference in the criminality of the two groups, and then the recipient of the program actually suffered more premature death. The first randomized experiment in policing, according to research by Dr. Peter Nyron at Cambridge University, began in Liverpool in 1963 to test the efforts on juvenile delinquency of decisions to divert arrested juveniles from prosecution. The first randomized experiment in the use of arrest for any offense was approved by the Minneapolis City Council in 1981 at the request of Police Chief Tony Bowser, to the led by Professor Lawrence W. Sherman, who was then the Director of Research of the Police Foundation in Washington. The policy impact and scientific attention given to the Minneapolis domestic violence experiment and its 5 replications, while subject to controversy, is described by Australian Members of Parliament Andrew Lai in his 2018 book credits Sherman with foregoing a new discipline, experimental criminology. Sherman's went on the lead on design over 40 randomized experiments with police in the US, Australia, and UK, and to found the Academy of Experimental Criminology in 1998 as its first president. The field of experimental criminology grew significantly during the 1990s and early 2000, resulting in the establishment of the Crime and Justice Group of the Campbell collaborations and other influential organizations, such as the Societies of Evidence-Based Policing in 5 countries. Next, American Society of Criminology. The American Society of Criminology is an international organization whose members pursue scholarly, scientific, and professional knowledge concerning the measurement, etiology, consequences, preventions, controls, and the treatment of crime and delinquency. The organization was renamed the Society for the Advancement of Criminology in 1946. Today, the American Society of Criminology comprises approximately 3,700 members from more than 60 countries. It is the leading professional criminological society in the world. The members include practitioners, academicians, and students in the many fields of criminal justice and criminology. Next to Sherman's view, the experimental criminology is scientific knowledge about crime and justice discovered from random assigned of different conditions in large field test. When properly executed, randomized field experiments provide the ideal test of theories about both the prevention and causation of crime. The Sherman says experimental criminology can help to develop a more emotionally intelligent approach to criminal justice and the world in which governments can refuse to waste money on ineffective sanctions despite populist pressures. A world in which citizens can demand that the government must test policies with well controlled experiment before spending vast sums in the name of crime prevention. The Sherman argues criminology has been rich in theory but poor in evidence. Here, what Sherman believes will liberate all theorists and commoners alike in scientific as opposed to forensic evidence that will presumably also be value neutral, objective, and beyond reproach. And the Sherman concedes that he could imagine a review of evidence on stop and search that concludes it reduces homicide from gun and knife, but may increase frictions between police and young males searched. And so he is all too aware of these issues, but he says nothing about what, if anything, the experimental criminologist can do in such a circumstances. So the three typical hypothesis is not deterministic but probabilistic. The statistical conventions define whether this difference is large enough to provincially accept the hypothesis, and a provided baseline and a treatment truly differ is in no other respect, and the participants have been randomly assigned to either the baseline or the treatment. A casual effect is shown. Next, why that much rigor? When one wants to study crime, studying a purposefully created analogous situation is the only way to generate data at all, since one suspects criminals to successfully hide on their activities. And do more severe sanctions reduce crime? The frequency of convictions for either crime may overestimate or underestimate the true effects of severity. Next, experimental criminology failure and victories. On evaluating the various aspects related to experimental criminology as a tool of crime prevention, it is clear that the field is in its budding stage and is therefore used mainly as a pilot method. The experimental criminology provides empirical guidelines to the judiciary, thereby facilitating the judgments. And in India, the experimental criminology is now getting acquaintance and both the police and the judicial system is utilizing is to facilitate their investigations and judgments. In India, it is difficult to implement reforms based upon criminological observations because of politics, bureaucratic obstacles, and ideological conflicts. In India, the judicial system empirical evidence is not equivalent to legislative provisions, and this is the greatest failure of India in the field of criminology. Indian courts consider such evidences as the last resort to know the truth, and much is ruled by legal jargon. And I would like to conclude by saying, despite having major victories, experimental criminology is in a pilot stage and therefore suffers from certain infrastructures. But it cannot be denied that experimental criminology is very important for building a solid evidence based not only for the judiciary but also for the legislators to review